because you can easily get good marks without actually implementing a lot of things. So what I would do is I'll open the SSA. I'll just use this as like an example on how to approach the question paper, right? So if you scroll down on the mark sheet, so there's the mark sheet. Don't spend too much time trying to display the image because it's only worth 5%. Don't do that. You need to have your priorities straight. Choose which when you sit down and think about it, would you rather aim for 5% of the paper or aim for the 95? You'd rather aim for the 95, right? So don't focus too much on the algorithm or displaying the image. As long as it compiles, you'll get your marks. So let's do that. So so there's the transformation, right? So the University of Johannesburg needs you to create a data structure called UJ image containing a dynamic two-dimensional array of structures representing pixels, right? So as as they've said, right? They said you should create a data structure called UJ image, which contains a dynamic, right? So dynamic means that it's not known at compile time, but rather known at run time. What does that mean? It means when you click run button and the console loads, that's when the array size gets known. So how do you achieve that? You achieve that by making it a pointer. So if you've made it a pointer, you get your marks because they told you it's dynamic. If you made it a fixed array, yeah, you're gonna lose marks. You might only, yeah, maybe you might get like, I don't know, maybe 40% of the actual marks. I don't know. Depends on your assistant. So let me open code blocks. And this two-dimensional array, it's an array of structures. So that means if we're going to make it a pointer, then we have to make it a pointer of structures, right? But before we make it a pointer of structures, we need to define the structure. So I'm gonna say new project and then console C++, and then SSA, which year was it? 2022. So SSA 2022, ComSci 1B. Let me just save it like that. So there's my project, and then my main.cpp. So what I advise you to do is before you do anything else, add the files that are required, right? How do you do that? You obviously will be given links here, or they might upload on Eve. It depends. So add all the files that you require. If you're not going to do the DLL bonus, don't even add the files. It's not necessary because you don't need it. Since you're not going to attempt nor do the DLL bonus part. So I'm gonna click download here. It should redirect me to Dropbox. And then there's Dropbox and then cancel and then do that. So there's everything, even the question papers there. So since you're using code blocks, right, you download the file that is the large word in it. So pixels underscore large, meaning it's a bigger file. This small one is meant for when you're running it on VPL. So I'll just download the large one since I'm running it on code blocks. And then I'll also download the main.cpp. And then I'll continue down with download only. And then this PDF, I do not need it because I actually have it. I have it open here. So I'm not gonna download it. And then I'm gonna go back to my folder. And then these are the files now. It's these two files, pixels underscore large.txt and main.cpp. Then I'm gonna copy these files, Control C, then go to where my project is saved. Remember, if you're using code blocks, you need to save your projects on T drive. You see that on mine, it's showing a C drive, right? Because this is a personal computer, right? This is a laptop, right? So I do not have the T drive. I only have C drive. You will click on C drive and then save the project on C drive. You do that upon creation of the project. So mine is saved inside code blocks folder. So there's the project and then Control V to paste. And then it's going to tell you that main.cpp already exists. What do you want to do? Do you want to skip that main.cpp or you want to replace that main.cpp with a new one? I obviously want to replace, so I'm going to click replace. And then if you go to code blocks, it's going to notify you that, wait, main.cpp was changed. Do you want to reflect those changes? Then you say yes. So you see, it says, do you want to reload it since main.cpp was changed? Then you say yes, or you can just click all, yes or all. And then you see my main.cpp has been updated. And then, yeah, that's pretty much all you have to do. And then let me just explain that part of creating the project. So let me pretend like I'm creating another project, right? No, what is it? So a new project, console application, C++. So when you're creating a new project, remember you need to save it in the T drive. There's part where it says folder to create the project in. You need to click these three dots. And then it's going to open your file explorer. Then you scroll down on the left panel. Then you choose T drive. You just select T drive and then you click select folder. For you, it will show T colon backslash because you should save your code on the T drive. Why are we saving code on the T drive? So that if for some weird reason your computer jams and you have to restart your laptop, remember UJ laptops, they delete everything that's there, every single file when you restart. Unless if you saved it on the T drive, you'll be able to retrieve that file. So hence we save it in the T drive so that you don't start from scratch your whole project. Because let's say you have those issues and there's 10 minutes left. You obviously can't build the project from scratch. And UJ couldn't care less whether, yeah, you forgot to do that. That's an automatic zero. You'd have to come back and try again next year. So make sure you follow protocol. So we have our project, right? So the obvious thing to do or the obvious class to create first is what? UJ image. That's the big class, right? So I'm gonna say new and then file. You could do this, right? There's other technique. I don't normally do it. I think in the other past papers I showed them. So this other technique, right? You can do this and say new class. You want to create a new class. And then you give the class a name. You say UJ image, like this, right? Exactly the same way I'm supposed to name it inside the PDF, the question paper. You see, UJ image. The U and the J and the I are in capital letters. So yeah, keep that in mind. And then here you can choose whether this class is going to come with a destructor, a copy constructor, even an assignment operator. So yeah, this is very good. And you can also specify which class it inherits from, or Baba. There's many advanced features inside code blocks. So I wanted to have a copy constructor, and I also wanted to put an assignment operator, right? For the sake of time, because I've do videos on these things. So for the sake of time, I'm not going to do all of that. And then you can define member variables, right? You can define what type of member variables you should have. You can say add and then create number of rows, number of columns, and do that. So let me try to use this feature extensively, right? Because I never really used it. So let me say, let's create the number of rows and columns, right? So unsigned short underscore rows. And you can even tell it to generate a getter and a setter for that for that um, for that variable, right? So I don't know about remove prefix. I'm just gonna unselect that. I don't know what that does. So that's why I'm not gonna select it. And then I click add. And then by default, it's going to make it private, right? Which is fine. And then I'm going to create underscore calls private, right? Oh yeah, you can choose here the scope, whether to make it private or protected or public. So underscore calls, I make them private and then add. And then let me not do too much because you're gonna spend way too much time here. Let me just create these few things, right? And then I'm gonna click create. It should generate the CPP file and the header file. If you notice at the bottom here, it does say there's the header file and it's going to be called this, which is exactly how we're planning to name it. And then there's the implementation file, it'll be called that, and it will put an include statement for you. Then I'm gonna click create, and then a new class is being created. Do you want it to add it to current project? Always say yes. So I'm gonna say yes, and then okay. And then it should add your file, right? UJ image, whatever. It should add everything. And you see that it did implement quite a few things for me. You see, it's just that you see the problem with this feature, right? You see, that's why I don't usually like this feature, because you see now it puts code for me in the wrong way, and it names things the wrong way. You see, get underscore rows, it's naming things the wrong way, but these parts are fine, right? These parts are fine. So you can do that. It's up to you. So I'm obviously gonna need to change a few things here. So this would be unsigned, and I'm gonna call it get rows, and then okay, I need to recreate everything. So set, okay, we don't typically set the rows and the columns. We just get them. So I only need accessors for that. I should have specified there. So get calls and then delete that. And then I'm just gonna restructure my code the way I would like it to be structured. So I'm gonna put this there, then copy constructor, right? So yeah, which is not bad than to type everything from scratch. It's not really bad. So there's the UJ image, right? So like I said, they said it should contain a dynamic two-dimensional array of structures. But before we define that 2D array, we need to define the structure. I mean, they told you it's an array of structures, so that the structure needs to exist first. So they always tell you a single pixel, they mean the record structure, will contain, for a grayscale image, meaning that it's a P2 image, is defined as follows. So all of these things should be within the record structure. That's what they mean. And then if you scroll down, the thing is sometimes they give you the name, sometimes they don't.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Why do we say unsigned short?
It's just a preference. Unsigned. It's a funny way. They've a funny humor. These people who made the language. So remember, this now goes back to maths. This is basic maths. Remember a positive number, right? It's you say plus 3, right? To that plus to just denote that it's a positive number. But there's a maths rule that you can omit that. It's not necessary, right? Doesn't really make any difference to the number. So if that's the case, then we should this would mean that the number is unsigned, meaning it doesn't have a sign. And then if we say we'll try to represent a minus number, it's -3, which is signed, meaning it has a sign, right? Signed, it has a sign, or it just means it is negative. And then unsigned means that it doesn't have a sign. And if a number doesn't have a sign, it typically means that the number is positive, right? So the number is positive. So unsigned, it just means this variable can only store positive numbers, which is basically from 0 to a specific range upper bound. So since I use short, then it's from 0 to 64,000. So the maximum int number can represent 64,000. Why didn't I use int? Int, the maximum for it is around 2 billion. There's no way I'm going to have 2 billion rows and columns. It's impossible. There's no way, because this image that I'm going to make is going to be very small. Most of the time it's going to be when it's big, the image is going to be around 500, no, 800 columns by 800 rows. So it's a very small number. Remember, the bigger the data type you use, the more space you're going to force the computer to use, which is unnecessary. You're not going to use 2 billion. There's no integer you're going to store that's going to be up to 2 billion. It's not there. So at least a short, that's the lowest that I can use. I can go. I can use a short. So I use a short because I want to save memory, but I also want to use unsigned, meaning when it's unsigned, meaning positive. There's no sign in the number. Basically means it's positive. It's a positive number. They took that from maths that yeah, in any number that's positive, you can omit the plus symbol. So therefore, that number would be unsigned or positive. So it's just a preference. You could remember this is first year, they don't really care. You could just leave it as short rows or int underscore rows. That's really up to you. But since I have experience in coding and I know how a lot of things work under the hood, sometimes there's no need to waste memory. Hence, I use the tools that are available. So I'm gonna use unsigned. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So if you scroll down, it's always at T5. That's where they talk about the structure. If you scroll down, you say they told you to define and call it UJ pixel. Failure to follow instructions, it's marks gone. Left, right, and center, you're losing marks. Even if your code is fine. You may realize that you get at most, let's say you implemented everything correctly, but you didn't name things properly. For example, the class, you didn't call it UJ image, you call it image. That's marks gone. The record structure didn't call it UJ pixel, you call it UJ card. Marks gone. You won't get full marks. So every time you're losing marks, you realize that you end up losing around 40% of the paper because you simply failed to follow instructions. So that's why I was scrolling down so that I know what I should call the structure. So since I now know what to call the structure, I know it's really annoying how they structure things. Why couldn't they just put it here and say you should call it UJ pixel? But they decided to put it down there. That's just the lecturer's preference. I don't know. So you have to always scroll down to see the name. So it's called UJ color and it has a visibility. So I need to go to here. Right before the UJ image, I'm going to define the structure. So to define a structure, I'm going to use the struct keyword, which just means the structure, but you abbreviate it. So struct UJ pixel, right? So why do we use a record structure? A record structure is basically the same as a class. When you have multiple different data types to represent one entity, you use a record structure or a class. What's the difference between a structure and a class? A class it's like it's a pimped version of a record structure. So it's like, for example, by pimped, it's like it's not it's not really like a huge difference, but still quite useful. So I like to make an example of a record structure in the class to say a record structure is like a TES. You know a car, right? The TES. It's like a TES, right? It is a very fuel efficient car. You can move from point A to point B, right? It's a good car. And then UJ image a class is like pimped version or advanced version of that thing. So a UJ image you can view it as like a Maserati, Ferrari, an Urus, Lamborghini. Like that's basically the difference between the two. They're exactly the same thing. The only difference, and that difference, right? Like I said, it's a very small difference. With the struct, you can only store data, meaning variables. With the class, you can store both the data and the function. That's the only difference. So the class just adds functions. That's it. With the struct, you can't add functions. That's the only limitation with the record structure. So here they told, as you can see, that's the reason why I opted to use a record structures because you see here, they're only talking about data. They didn't say create this, each pixel has a function that if they had said each pixel has a function, then I would have known that I need to create a class. In this case, they said this data is it true or false, it's an integer, it's a list, it's out, they're referring to data, not behavior or methods or functions. So hence I opted for record structure. You do using that the right choice, there's also marks for that. So the fact that you use the record structure, there's marks for that. So visibility, it's a Boolean, right? True or false. So I'm gonna call it visibility and name your variables properly, right? For to not confuse other people, right, when they're reading your code. So bool visibility, I will literally name it visibility, right? Remember, this is define a Boolean, you use the bool keyword, which means that that variable can store a true or false. And then current intensity, right? You don't really need that keyword current. You can just call it intensity because now the variable will be too long. The name will be too long, but it's up to you. It's really up to you. An integer in the range 0 to 255. So when they say current intensity, right, the thing is you need to be able to understand what you're actually solving. They say it indicates the intensity of the pixel, meaning that's the actual pixel. It's an indirect way of telling you this is the actual pixel. So when you do your 2 ppm or you override the stream insertion operator, you output this value. That's the actual pixel. Remember, it's a P2 image grayscale, meaning that it's an array of integers. Even though they're trying to force you to make it as an array of structures, but it's actually an array of integers. That's the actual image. And we need to take note that it's between 0 and 255. So, and they said it's, you see that it's 0. There's no negative value there. So I'm going to use the unsigned. You don't have to, but I'm just going to use that. So unsigned short. And why should I use an int and say unsigned int? If you say unsigned int, right, what happens is that the upper bound increases. So that means you're able to store a number between 0 and 4 billion. Why would you want to do that when they clearly told you that the number is between 0 and 255? So hence you need to use the right things. That's why you see sometimes when you go to Google, what is this, Google Play Store or Apple Store, and you try to download an app and you find out that it's 5 gig. And you ask yourself, what's going on here? Why is the app so big? It's because of choices like this. People are not taking into account that space matters, just using any data type. And I've seen it happen until you graduate, students are still using whatever data type they feel like using. It doesn't work that way. You need to make sure that you try to accommodate all types of users. Some users don't have space, they don't have storage. They use phones that cost 650 rands. So why would you want to make an app that big by using the wrong data types? So just to ingrain that thing into your mind, normalize making choices of the right data types. So answer in short, intensity, right? Intensity. Like I said, it's not necessary to call it current. You see, if you said current, you see how long the name is. So that's why I said don't call it current. The word intensity should suffice. And then the last one is intensities in plural. So it's a list of replacement intensities where each intensity is an integer in the range 0 to 255. Right? So this is a list of this thing, this intensity. Remember, this is a single intensity. This one is a list. They even told you it's a list of intensities. And by list, there's two ways to remember. They didn't did they tell you how many intensities are there? Yeah. Nope. So this is where they want you to use that brain of yours. So since we are not no, we don't know exactly how many intensities or how many values are there, we can either use a vector or a list, which is basically the same thing. There's slight variations. It's up to you what you want to use. And then remember, since it's a class, we need to include its header file. So hash include, you can say a vector or you can include the list works exactly the same way as a vector. It has the same methods, exactly the same methods. It's just that there's extra methods, but you don't need to know those extra methods. You are not in an advanced computer science class. So you can include the list. So you can literally make it a list. Literally what they told you. They said list. You literally make a list. So you could come here and say standard. I don't like using, even the author himself of C++ is called Bjorn Strostrup. He always does interviews. He says don't normalize saying using standard namespace, right? So fully qualify your things. That's his advice. So that's me. That's why I do say things a certain way. So standard namespace and then list. And then since it's a template class, right? You need to pass in these anchor brackets, right? Or brace this, but this less than or greater than symbol, whatever you want to call them. And then you pass the type of each of those things within that list. So it's a list of what? It could be a list of apples, right? It could be a list of bananas. So what? It's a list of what? You check here, they told you it's a list of replacement intensity where each intensity is an integer. So they told you it's an integer. And you might say, well, why using short? Short is not an integer. Well, it is. In full, remember C++, if you to try and study C++, ne, is to like try to try to fully master the universe. It's impossible to finish. You will never reach a finish line. You're always learning in languages like C++. It's too big. It's a very broad thing. So there's many ways you can approach and do some things. If you wanted to be that meticulous and write everything in full, you could say unsigned short int. So that's how it is actually in full, like this. So you see, it's an int, it's still an int, but it's a short int. But then you see that it becomes way too long. Hence, I always omit that int keyword. So it's still an integer. Don't be like, well, it's a short. Well, short is an int. So I'm just going to say unsigned short here. Or you can just say short, that's up to you. And then I'm going to call it intensities like this. So I'll do things a bit different. I'll use a list, an actual list. You could use a vector. It's one and the same thing. But I like to be 100% accurate. When they say list, I use a list. I know they didn't teach you a list yet. Hence, your only option is a vector. But remember, this is C++. Dr. Stung actually likes it when you use things that he hasn't taught you, as long as it works. It's not like informatics. If you're doing informatics, you get as a big fat zero for writing things they didn't teach you. In ComSci 1, they really don't care. Just write something that works. Do you answer the question? Good. When the image is created, blah, blah, blah. So we've created the record structure, right? That's fine. I don't want to get to the logic. That's something you don't even need to implement the logic. You see that you can get distinction without implementing the logic. So the university, you need a two-dimensional array of structures. So I need inside UJ image, since I have the struct, I need to create the 2D array. So I'm gonna come here and say it's called UJ pixel, right? Pointer, because remember what I said, what I've been saying in my videos. If you have two pointers, imagine one pointer represents each dimension. So if they say two dimensions, then you use two pointers. So underscore pixels, I'll call it underscore pixels, right? And then there you go. But then before we continue, let's finish the defining the full structure. So I'm going to scroll down and then I'm going to, where is it? Yeah. So they said define a UJ pixel structure as per given table with alignment padding disabled. So we need to disable alignment padding so that when you write it to a file, there's no space padding added. So there's no that space, whatever. Everything will be added right next to each other, right? You can imagine it's like you're in a classroom. Remember, a classroom usually have spaces in between, right? So you have the middle row and the first row and the third row, right? Imagine there's like three rows. The first row, the middle row, which is the second row, and the last row. And then there's spaces in between each row, right? What we're about to do right now, it's like we're telling the computer, it's like your teacher or your lecturer entering class and saying, guys, move closer. So you remove that space in between each row. Then you guys literally sit right next to each other. So the tables are literally touching. That's what we're trying to do. You might not see its significance. So if you really want to learn more, the textbook is there. You have to go read the textbook if you really want to understand it. So this is the formula. You're gonna say pragma push pack, right? You want to pack it and then push it in terms of 1 byte each. So it means that each each pixel or UJ pixel that you write to a file will be saved as 1 byte. And then after you've allocated that memory, you need to free it. So pack pop. So let me make a simple example. So since it's 1 byte, the computer is intelligent enough to know. So let's say I have a UJ pixel here. And remember what I said? I said no spaces after. So this space is not there. There's no padding, right? There's no spaces. So that means they're literally next to each other. So UJ pixel 1, let's just imagine that's UJ pixel 1 and UJ pixel 2, and then UJ pixel 3. You might be like, how will it know where each pixel starts and where the other pixel ends? Remember, it views it in terms of bytes. So it's gonna see, oh, this is the first byte, and then this is the second byte, and then this is the third byte. So it's going to read. So it's gonna start at U, right? Start at the beginning of the file. It reads. It stops there. It's like, oh, I've read 1 byte. Then I should stop, and then it stops. And then it continues, reads. Oh, I've read another 1 byte, and it stops. And then it reads. So you see, it becomes efficient. It knows when to start, when to stop. You don't have to worry about that. The computer does that for you. You just have to pack your things in terms of 1 byte. I hope that makes sense. So we have our DJ image. So let's quickly go back up to where they talk about DJ image. So don't focus on this part. I don't know why this the way they write the PDF, it's chaotic. One thing is there, the other thing is there. Like, why don't you just structure things well? That's when you realize the people made this as people in STEM. STEM people, they have this tendency of not making things beautiful. Things need to be very demure, not the way they're doing it. It's all over the place. You can even fail to not like literally fail the paper because things are just not in like it's chaotic. Because you'd expect the logic for each transformer or whatever the derived class to be here, but it says overrides or implements. Now you must go back up and then you implement and then you go back down and then you go back up. You see how much work you're doing, and you're pressurized with getting those specific marks because maybe your PCM is not looking good and you're panicking. Yeah. So I'm just gonna scroll down here to UJ image. So let me show you how easy it can be to get marks. So UJ image class is a transformer which implements the transform non-value returning function, right? We don't care about transformer yet. We're not there yet. The UJ image delegates its own blah blah blah. It does all those things. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking at I want T1. So T1, you must create a class to represent UJ image. The class must make use of the principles of good design known to you. It must additionally make use of a dynamic two-dimensional array of structures. So when they say principles of good design, they're just telling you that if the marks depend on whether you are doing the practicals or not, because they expect you to remember what things are always there in a class. For example, parameterless constructor. And then it needs to have a parameterized constructor too. And then it needs to have a copy constructor, and then it needs to have a destructor. Then you need to have your accessors. You need to have your mutators. You need to have all of those things. So let me do this. Let me delete that. But yeah, we'll add. So I have to fix and add more things, but that's fine. So let me scroll down. So the thing is, when it comes to, you see, it's a bit tricky on how, see, like this principles of good design known to you. You don't know whether you should create a getter for the pixel or a mutator for the pixel. It's always like very vague, but I always advise you to create it. So you must remember for rows and columns, we don't typically want to change the size. We just want to access the size. So you only have accessors. And then for the pixel, you can access the pixel. So remember, I want to access a UJ pixel. So this function should return a UJ pixel. And I'm gonna call it get pixel, right? And then, oh, I forgot to put, you see this thing of using this tool. I forgot to put a const at the end. So what does this const mean? It means whatever code that goes within the functions should make sure it leaves the object in a constant state, basically the way it found it, which makes sense because this is a read-only function, meaning that it's meant to read the rows, read the columns. Even this one, it's only meant to read the pixel. It's not meant to mutate or change it. If the mutate keyword sort of like throws you off, I suggest you watch sci-fi. You start to understand what is a mutation. And they say that whatever is mutated. So yeah, be be inquisitive. Go watch sci-fi. So principles of good design known to you, like I said, it depends on what things you need. So what I typically like to do is I go to T4, right? T4 is when they tell you which operators to overload, right? So some things you might omit, right? It's up to you. It's really up to you. But there's certain things that are worth marks. So you need to make sure you include those. So for example, all these operators, you need to declare them. They're worth marks. So the assignment operator, you see the assignment operator, even if Jesus were to come back or whatever, it'll still be there in the question paper. Assignment, there's no mistake. Doesn't matter whether you're writing a sick test or whatever on Saturday it doesn't matter. Assignment is always there. It's a must for it to be there because there's this thing called the big three. Your class should always have a copy constructor. Your class should always have an assignment operator, and your class should always have a destructor. They might ask you this question in theory. Name the big three, and then 3 marks gone. Support for using the stream operator for output. So that's a stream insertion. So I need to define that. So remember, I read the textbook. So obviously, if someone is able to write a whole textbook worth around 1 point something pages, that person really knows the language. So I take his advice. I don't care whether your lecturer does things. The problem with students is that you like cramming code. Don't cram code, understand. So friend functions from the textbook itself, the author, he said that friend function should always be at the top. So you need to follow good design principles. So it's always be at the top before public. Every friend function, even if you have 2 or 3 or 10, they need to be declared there. Why? Because it's a friend function. It's not part of the class. So it doesn't matter whether you put it on public or private. And if you do that, you put it on public and private, you face certain issues in the future. What if you made a mistake and you put it private? That means that function is private. It's not meant to be accessed. And then your code crashes and you spend 5 hours trying to decipher that error. So follow good design principles to avoid a lot of problems. Put the friend functions outside any label, whether public or protected label. And then since I want to use the I stream, I'm going to include the IO stream, input output stream, right? So it returns and I'm going to specify it from standard namespace, and then operator keyword, and then less than because it's an insertion operator, and then O stream by reference. And then what do I want to insert into the O stream? If you go back to the videos that they covered, I did explain this extensively, but in simple terms, remember how you see out. We want to be able to say see out image. Which one is on the left? Which one's on the right? See out is on the left. This one's on the right. Hence, I pass the parameters in that order. I start by passing see out, and then I pass obj image or uj image. So I need to pass in uj image, right? Uj image, but if I pass it by value, it's going to be slow. Because what if the uj image object is like 2 gig? You see that I'm gonna spend maybe even 30 minutes waiting for it to output because the object is very big. So I'm gonna pass it by address, meaning that I go to where it resides in memory. Its address. Like for example, you go visit your friend. Don't you ask for the address? Don't you have to know the address to know to visit them? Yes, you need to know the address. So it's exactly similar. But then since you have possibility of making permanent changes at your friend's address. For example, you can open the fridge and drink their very expensive juice. You can't bring it back unless you have to buy it for them, but then you can't bring back that exact one you drank. So you have the ability to make permanent changes. So in order to prevent that, you put a const keyword there. So it's going to be efficient. You might be like, what's the point? Yeah, I suggest you start practicing coding. Just go beyond the scope of school. You understand that these things really do matter. The authors wouldn't write a whole book with 1,000 pages explaining that language and all these different things if they actually didn't matter. They really do matter. So in your function, your this operator, this thermization operator function will always look like this. Const reference, always. You don't pass the object as it is. Else you realize when you're compiling your code, it takes time. Might even take 30 minutes compiling. Trust me. 30 minutes is even small. In the industry, they can wait for 5 hours while the code is compiling. So yeah, you need to pass things by address. So support for double indexing by way of an overloaded invocation operator, which returns the pixel located in a specific row and column. Remember that practical whereby you're doing UJ row, blah, blah, blah. That one is not something that's going to be that comes default into C++. Hence, we took that route to the long way. The normal way is just creating the double, passing the row and the column. So how would you know? So let's say you forgot, you're not really sure how the operator should look. You go to the main that they gave you. You look at the code that Dr. Stung wrote. You see obj image, and they pass the row and the column. So it means it's that operator, the one whereby you pass in round brackets, not square brackets. So I've already deciphered. Now I need to create my operator. So operator overloading. And then I'm going to say, so yeah, let me start by, I'm not going to decide on what to return. So operator, what's the operator? It's round brackets. And then you pass another set of round brackets to specify what parameters this operator will take in. It will take in two parameters, a row and a column. So unsigned short, and then unsigned short. And then depending, right? It really depends. But yeah, I would always advise you just so that you don't have to overthink, just always return it by reference. But if you want to use this operator in such a way that you need to mutate, you need to return a UJ by reference. So remember, this is meant to access not UJ image, a UJ pixel. So this operator here, it serves as a accessor. So hence this one over here, even though I wasn't done implementing it, this one becomes irrelevant. There's no point in having it because this operator does what this function does or was supposed to do. So I'm going to delete that function and then I'll make use of this operator. If they didn't tell you override the double indexing operator, then you have to create an accessor and a mutator for your pixel. So if you return it by value, remember by value means I'm returning the actual pixel, right? Which means that I cannot mutate, I cannot change it. What does that mean? Remember what this operator is for. It means that you can say you can have obj image, right? And then that obj image, you can put round brackets and pass in a row and a column. That's what this operator is meant to do, so that you can be able to access. But then if you return it by value, it means that you're only accessing. You cannot try to do an equal sign like this and do assignment. But since I do not know most of the time, and I don't want you guys to be stressed on thinking, just always return it by address so that it does both. It can access and mutate depending on the code. So it's going to return UJ pixel by reference. And then, yeah, we'll calculate the max once I'm done implementing UJ image. Just UJ image on its own to see how many marks you can score. What is it? Okay, we're done with the operators, right? Yeah, we're done with the operators, but then we're missing That's the thing. There's quite a lot to unpack, and the way they're just putting things all over the place. They should just put all the information related to UJ image under one bullet. They should just do that. But yeah, they like to separate things. So add a member function to UJ image, which will load the information from the provided text file. So I need to check my main.cp to see what to call the methods, right, to read from the file. So you see, this one is called save to that because it meant to save to that file. And then I don't see the read one. This is weird. They give you a main whereby they're not reading. This is not normal. So they expect you to put the function. You see, it depends. So cramming, you see, it will never help you out. So it depends. So hence, I would advise you to, yeah, I would advise you to always check your main to see what's required. You see that they didn't give it a name, so I can give only the file that's meant to read. The one that's meant to write to that file, the name has been given here. I need to use that name. And all the functions, they always take in the file name, which is a string. So I'm gonna have functions for file handling, right? And then we need to have a load, right? I'm gonna always call it load. So load the information from the provided text file. So obviously both of them are void because if you check here, do we assign those functions to anything? Nope. We don't say this and say it's equals to. So that means that function doesn't return anything. So void. Both of them will always be void. So void load from txt. That's most of the time that's how Dr. Stung names it. So I'll just use that convention. You don't need to cram to even how you should name it. Just name it whatever way that makes sense. So string, I need to import the string because I want to use the string data type. Remember, the string is a class, right? It's an object. So I need to import its header file. So standard namespace, string type, and then this will be the file name, right? And then void save to that. It needs to match exactly because what your main, remember they told you that the code that was provided needs to, you need to make sure that your function or your main needs to work with your class. This main that they've given you needs to work with your class. See, they've called the function save to that. Even the capitalization, be very careful. Programming is for people who pay extensive attention to detail. You need to be like that. It's by not something that you can just avoid. You have to pay attention to details. Yeah, that's pretty much what I need. So you see, if I didn't have this operator here, right? Remember I said this operator is meant to access and change the pixels. Hence, I didn't create an accessor for my pixels and a mutator for my pixels because they told me to use an operator. If they didn't tell you, then here you'd have to create an accessor for your pixel and a mutator for your pixel. So getters and setters for your pixels. And then in all cases, the functions will take in the name of the file as a parameter. They told you the name of the file, which is string data type. And then I need to scroll up. We are not done. The other thing is trick. You'll never be fully done because, like I said, you see the information is all over the place. You must look for everywhere. So now we're missing the delegation thing, right? So that function, we're missing it and that transformer, blah, blah, blah. So we need to create that. So create a transformer. Yeah, okay. Let me just give you an advice, right? Or some warning. Okay, I didn't, you see me and forgetting things. I didn't parameterize it. So you should take in two unsigned shorts, right? Which is rows and columns. And you can also take in a default pixel, so UJ pixel. Yeah, it's complaining about this because, another thing, hey, you need to be very, very careful. Hey, and in C++, it's not, COMSA 1B, it's not a joke. It's not something to play around with. You see, remember, this is meant to access one pixel, the UJ pixel, right? And then within that UJ pixel, I get the intensity. Look at how he named it, or how he expects you to name it, which is a very long name. So now I need to go to change my record structure. Like I said, you need to work with the main they gave you. So that means this shouldn't just be called intensity, it should be called current intensity, because that's how he expects you to call it. So I'm gonna build, okay, the transform method is not there yet, so I need to create the transform method. So I'm gonna go to here because now I was getting to the delegation part, right? So which is fine. So let's get the delegation part. So this is my accessors, right? And then delegation. So we need a transformer. So now it forces me to create the header file because it will say transformer is not defined, but it's fine because we're not there yet. But let me just create the header file and the CVP file. So transformer, and then I'm gonna say file and then new. You could say class, that's up to you, but I see that class is not really a good thing because it adds extra things that you don't want. Like it doesn't name the way you'd want to name them or how you usually name them. So I'm gonna create the header file for transformer and just create an empty class for now. Just class transformer, empty, nothing. And then I'm going to say file, C++. There we go. Transformer.cpp. And then select all. If you don't select all right, you won't get any errors, even though your code has errors, which is a problem because if you can't see errors, but your code has errors, but your code doesn't run, you get confused. You'll be like, okay, my code is not running, but there's no errors because it didn't select all. When you select all, it means tell me. You are telling C++ to tell you when there's errors. So you need to be able to see those errors. So that's why I select the all. And then hash include the transformer.h header file, right? I just created the header file there, just so that I have it there. So we need to create an instance. So now we need to be careful. Is it composition or delegation? Remember in the video what I said, if it's composition if the life cycle, that object manages the life cycle of that other object. So for example, your heart, you have a heart inside of you, right? So that would be composition. Why is that composition? Your heart's lifespan is managed by you. You get to dictate or decide how long the heart should live, or lungs. Let's view it in terms of lungs, or your kidneys, whatever. But let's view it in terms of lungs. Your lungs, the relationship you and your lungs have is composition, because your lungs are within you, they're inside of you. But why are we saying composition? Because you manage the life cycle. That means the lifespan of your lungs depends on you. What do you mean by that? It means your diet. If you're smoking cigarettes and smoking weed every day, do you think and drinking the hot stuff, like really hot stuff, like 50% alcohol, and you don't dash, right? So your lungs lifespan is dependent on you. You manage its life cycle. You get to dictate how long it can live. So that's pretty much what composition means. Aggregation is the opposite. It means that the two entities can exist independently. So, for example, let's say, for example, you're in a relationship, you and your boyfriend, right? You are two different individuals. You can live without the other person. I know you'd be like, yeah, I cannot live with my boyfriend or with my girlfriend, blah blah blah. Yeah, it's like our souls are intertwined. Yeah, yeah. That's just you being in your fairy tale dream. But the facts always stand is that you can live without the other person. Before you met, were you not breathing? You're breathing, right? Exactly. So those two things, they can live independent of each other. So pretty much that's the difference. So, and they'll tell you, they'll make it very simple. They'll tell you whether the UJ image manages its life cycle or not. They'll tell you. So you need to have a transformer instance. So let's create that transformer. So transformer. Okay, I won't decide what type of should it be a pointer or not? It's a use a pointer if it's composition. You don't use a pointer if it's aggregation. And remember, you don't think it's always going to be aggregate composition or aggregation. It's not always going to be the case. That's why I'm trying to explain to you so that you really understand and not lose marks. Everything that you write is marks. So make sure you really understand what's required. So which implements a transform method, right? And it returns a non-value returning, which is void. So basically they're telling it returns void. It's called transform. So I need to create that method. So let me create it after here. I'm call it avoid transform, right? I don't know why. Okay. You see that this thing is highlighting, meaning that it's reserved. It's already used inside C++, which is very dangerous. They should have said that this should be called transform with a capital F. You might face errors. You might, because this is something, it might be a conflict, it might conflict with what's actually declared inside C++. As you can see, anything that's dark green, it's reserved. You see string, isn't it the same color as this transform function? It is, which goes to show this is already part of C++. This is very risky sometimes, the way the things that these lecturers are doing. Because what if it actually doesn't code? That means no one's code inside the class will run. And if no lecturer picks that up, that means all of you guys are cooked. Yeah, that's why I'm saying, and they need to think about these things before just giving you the paper. Non-value returning void method that will set the pixels, blah blah blah. And says, I don't care about that information. The main information that I want is here. The UJ image delegates its own method to the transformer, right? That's delegation. That's the implementation part for UJ image. That's basically it's inside UJ image.cpp. The main part that I want is this one. The UJ image class must manage its life cycle, the life cycle of the transformer. That's when you get to decide and put a pointer there, because now you're managing its life cycle. So there's marks for this. There's only this part here. There's marks for that. I think it might be worth 5%. There's one line that I've highlighted might be worth 5%. So you see, be very careful. Understand the question. Is it composition or aggregation? Composition, there's a pointer. Aggregation, there's no point. And then, yeah, okay, it's gonna complain and say it doesn't know transformer. So there's this thing called secular dependency, like re-including header files over and over in such a way that it ends up causing errors in your code. To avoid this, right, always in the header file whereby you are doing composition. So you see the header file whereby I'm doing composition in, it's called ujimage.h. So inside ujimage, I do what I call a forward declaration. Why do I do so? Let me show you the error, because it will say, I don't know what transformer is. It's not a defined type or something. It does not name a type. Basically, it doesn't know what is something called a transformer. You don't want to make the mistake of including the header file. It will create errors. You won't be able to fix your code. I'm telling you, you won't. So you only put forward declaration here. So transformer. We just to say, it's sort of like a promise to say, okay, I promise transformer is something. For now, the only information you need to know is that transformer is just a class, it's a type. But an empty class. So hence we just say forward declaration. I mean, the authors of C++, they could have done better and make it simpler. But yeah, that nothing is perfect in life. So yeah, this is how you actually always have to get around that error. And then when you go to the CJ image.cpp, you see that it'll say that transformer is incomplete. Why are you trying to access that method, blah, blah, blah. That's when you put the header file inside the ujimage.cpp. That's where you put the header file for the transformer. So we'll decide. Depends on the practical also. We'll see what they want you to do. Yeah, you need to create an enum and put that success variable. You see? So I think that's the only error. Yeah, that's the only error. So success was not declared. That's a nice thing about some errors. They tell you straight. It's not declared, meaning it does not exist. Meaning Dr. Stung expects you to declare it. He doesn't have to tell you. You need to know because you've been submitting practicals, right? Didn't you create enums in your practicals? Yes, you did. So yeah, so enum, I'm gonna call my enum status to just show the status of the app. So I'm gonna start with error in range because I know there's gonna be a range error. Let's say -1 and then success, right? Keeping it simple. I don't have, I'm not sure about what is error file handling. Error in opening the file, right? Whatever. I don't want to worry about that. I'll add more constants as I see fit. So you see now that error will go away when I create this. You see that error went away. But then this is undefined reference to transform. Wait, where's that error? Oh, you see when you get those errors though, it's fine. Just leave them for now. It doesn't see it in here in the UJ image or CVP. That's why it says get rows does not exist because you haven't implemented it. Basically, it's saying there's no implementation of that thing. Why are you calling it? You didn't implement it, so there's no you'll get nothing back by calling it. So why are you calling it? You don't have to worry about that because we're not done yet, right? So we're still implementing. So this is the complete UJ class now, UJ image class, right? So now we can go to the implementation. So you see for save, I know you might feel tempted to do that thing that I showed you. Just don't do it. Just create your header files separately on your own and your CPP files separate because you see that it ends up creating things and naming it the way you wouldn't want to name it, right? So I'm gonna remove the friend keyword because in the textbook it says when you implement, you need to omit the friend virtual keywords. You need to omit them. They shouldn't be there. And remember, this is a friend function, meaning it's not part of the class. So I shouldn't go there and say UJ image colon colon. You don't do that. When you do that, you only do that to the things that are part of UJ image. Remember, that's just a friend. Does your friend stay at your house? Nope. They are not part of your family. You might regard them as family, but you're not related by blood. So that's pretty much what C++ is saying there. It's like this is your friend. This is not part of who you are, or you're not even related. It's just a friend. So why do you mean that this is part of UJ image? It's not part of UJ image. So yeah, and then all the other ones are part of UJ image. It's only that friend function. You might actually get a lot of. I think right now you might be swimming around. I don't know. Depends. Might be swimming around 50%, somewhere there. Even though you might see there's no code, but somewhere there around 50%, especially if you make sure you do your design, just make sure you do your design. That's free marks. And then, and then transform. And then, okay, this one, I don't know. I see this thing of putting things there. I was not supposed to create it as virtual. Virtual, you only put it, you make a virtual destructor only in the base class. This is not going to be a base class, so that virtual keyword is not needed. So I'm going to leave it. It's not needed. So there we go. These are all our functions. So we need to, okay, remember we have an assignment operator, right? This assignment operator. That means we will need code that's inside the parameterized constructor. We will need code that's inside the copy constructor. We'll need code that's inside the destructor. So you see we're repeating code. So instead of repeating code, I'll avoid that by creating what we call a helper method, or basically a private function. So void, I'm gonna call it constructor, the first helper method, which is just basically what I'm doing is I'm creating functions that have the code for these different things. So I'm gonna create a function that will have the code for my constructor. I'll create a function that will have code for my copy constructor. I'll create a function that has code for my destructor because I'm gonna use that same code more than once. So hence it's only it's only reasonable to call it um constructor, copy constructor, and destructor. So that it's easy for my memory to, if I call it alloc, dialog, you see, for me it doesn't, it doesn't work that way. It won't work. It won't go well for me. So I would rather name it exactly what it's supposed to, the code that it's supposed to have. This constructor method will have code for that's inside the construct. This one will have code that's inside the copy construct. Straightforward. And then it's gonna take in a const reference. And then the last one is the destructor. Remember the destructor doesn't, your destructor, you see, does the destructor take in any parameters? Nope. Hence, the helper method should also not take in any parameters. So you can view this helper methods as like a copy of these things. As you can see, they mimic those exact same things. Look at my constructor. Doesn't it take these three parameters? Yes, it does. There's those three parameters. Doesn't this helper method copy constructor take in the exact same parameter as my copy constructor? Yes, it does. The destructor, doesn't it look similar to this destructor helper method? Yes, it does. Because they're called helper methods. They're meant to have that code within those things. The Within the constructor, within the copy constructor, that's pretty much it. If you don't do this right, you're gonna have a lot of code. You might be like, whoa, that's too many functions. Now you're adding extra things. Whoa, it's gonna help you write less code. Trust me, you don't want to repeat yourself, because if you make a mistake of allocating or deallocating, your program crash and you get capped at 40. So just to avoid that, make sure you create helper methods. Will I need an enforce range? Let me create an enforce range. You don't have to, right? But remember this, you see these things here. Okay, you get, remember they said use good design that's known to you. You see, principles of good design that are known to you. They expect you to know that you need to create helper methods. There's marks for that. And then void enforce range, right? It enforces the range. And then you need to always append a const there. Why the const? Because you're gonna use it in functions like this. Okay, not this. Let me see. Yeah, you're gonna use it in some functions that, or some places whereby there's a const. So just to be safe, you put a const there. And then you take in three variables. Remember, you can just say int, right? That's up to you. Me, I'm gonna use unsigned short. Unsigned short, unsigned short. Yeah, we'll calculate after I've done implementing UJ image. So unsigned short, unsigned short. So you need the y3 integers. The first integer is the value that I want to check that whether it's in range or not. Then the second parameter is the minimum or the starting range, the lower. And then the third parameter is the upper bound, or the stopping, the way it should stop. That's pretty much the flow. So I'm gonna copy that enforce range function and put it here. So that's the first function I'm gonna implement. And don't forget to specify that it's part of UJ image, or else you get those errors that I was getting. And then what else do I need? C standard library. Remember, I'm gonna need the exit function. So I'm gonna include C standard stdlib, C standard library, because I need the exit function to be able to exit, right? It might work without even importing it or including it, but just to be safe, you can't always, you can't live off faith. Sometimes it's not gonna go your way. So even God helps those who help themselves. So don't be like, I have faith. I'll take chances. Oh, okay, take the chances. So I have minimum. Don't name it minimum, min, right? You see, when you start getting bold colors, that's when you know something is part of C++. So I would advise you call it lower. And don't call it lower bound. You see, if I double click this, you see this is also reserved. So you end up doing touching things you're not supposed to be touching. So just call it lower and upper, or maximum and full, or minimum, or int min, or int lower, whatever you want to call it. But make sure don't use those specific names I told you not to use. Then it's simple. I just check if my value is below the expected lower, which is the expected starting point, right? And then I'm gonna output an error message, CR. What's the error message? Value that you've entered is okay. I'm gonna make a small error output because I don't want to write long text. That value is less than this value, lower, the expected lower. And then I put an end of line character. And then I exit my my um my app, right? It stops immediately. Then I'm gonna copy this command. I'm gonna copy and paste this, and then just because it's exactly the same thing, and then just change lower to upper. But then I need to also change the symbol because now if I need to check if I've exceeded the expected stopping point or maximum or upper bound, and then the symbol needs to be now changed to greater, and then that's it. That's how you enforce the range. Done. Now we need to go and implement. Let's start with the constructor, right? Let's start with constructor. Remember what they told you. Everything that they tell you, when they tell you, remember this, they told you this, right? They said this is not between 0 and 255. They're not just telling you for fun. You need to enforce the range. That's why they told you. So you need to make sure it's within that range. Even these ones, you need to make sure that they're within the range. But it's fine. We're not gonna make it very complex. I'll just only validate this, the current intensity. And then it needs to take in, these are my rows, right? And then these are my calls, and then this is my pixel, which is the default pixel that the user is going to provide me. And then I'm going to enforce the range, and then I'm gonna what value am I enforcing? I'm enforcing the rows, and they need to start between some minimum and some upper. So therefore, I need to create my class constants. So I'm gonna come here and I'm gonna create my class constants. And there's marks. Remember, they said use good design principles known to you. Class constants are also good design principles. They need to see that. So static const int default, okay. Const unsigned short. You can say const int, right? That's up to you. Unsigned short default rows is equals to, let's say the image is, okay, I want the image to be pretty big, right? So 800 by 800. So static const unsigned short default underscore calls, which is also 800, the same value. Then when it comes to the pixel, right? Remember UJ pixel, how many, this is a complex data type because it has other values or other variables, right? Which, okay, this is very tricky now with the default pixel. Why? Because I have a whole vector, right? I have a whole vector. So let me try something, or a whole list. Let me try something. Because you also need to initially give that initial values, default values, right? So UJ pixel is a complex type on its own, meaning that when I initialize it, I need to use curly braces, right? Because there's multiple values. I have visibility, I have current, I have this, so I have multiple values. So I'm going to say static const. Since I have multiple values, you don't use const. You use const expression. So const expr, which just stands for const expression. UJ pixel. If you use const here, your code crashes. So be very careful. Default underscore pixel is equals to curly braces. Then we initialize them. When you use the curly braces, you initialize it in that exact same order. So visibility, current, what, and then this. So I need to pass in the visibility first, which is a Boolean. So, the thing is, that's what I don't like about this paper. they mix things, they put things everywhere. So if you want to find what default values you're supposed to use, they tell you in the very first, the second bullet, right? Yeah, okay, the very first bullet, which is this one. When the image is created, the pixel must be read from the text file, right? Later in more, whose contents are described below. However, the visibility of every pixel must be set to false. They tell you what to do. You need to do that. So false. So I'm going to set it to false. And then the current intensity, you can come up with it in normal, some value there. So curly braces, and then I put false. For the current intensity, I'm just going to set it to 0. And then remember here, what comes here, it's the intensities, which is another complex type. So there's multiple values. So I need to include another set of curly braces at a specific point. So if I remember very well, right, you can initialize, you can set all the values to 0 by doing what? Yeah, I think you can set all the values to 0 by doing this. By just passing curly braces and you put 1 0 there. No, is it 1 0 or just empty curly braces? I'm not sure. Let me just build and see. Is it empty curly braces or it's multiple? Is it okay, I think it's 0. Um yeah, it's complaining. Yeah, it's not a literal. So yeah, I need to pass a value. You can't just put empty. So just put 0 there because I don't, since you don't know how many are there, you don't know the type const expression, blah, blah, is not what a literal. So in class data member const of non-literal type. I don't know what they mean by that. So let me do this. Let me try doing that. Okay, it'll disapprove because there's 3 values. Okay, so if it gives you problems, like you see right now, it's with that's why I was avoiding this thing. Created. You have a whole another collection here that you need to set to 0. So what I would do is I'll only this time, right? Only this time around, I won't have the default pixel because the UJ pixels it's a bit complicated. I won't have the constant. I'll put in the physical values. I won't use a constant for that. I know it's a bit tricky, but yeah, if you have such situations whereby your record structure has they tell you there's a list of things. Like you're gonna use a vector or a list. That means there's multiple values. If your record structure has a list of vector, don't create a default pixel. Just put that in mind. And then, since I don't want to put that default pixel, right, I will also avoid taking the pixel from the user because that's going to tend to complicate things. So I'll also avoid that. So I'll just create a constructor that is only the rows and columns because they didn't tell you to take in create a constructor with rows and columns and a pixel. They didn't tell you, but you can put it, but then they didn't tell you. Yeah, because there's no way of going around it, this thing of initializing it to, because everything is fine here. Const expression UJ pixel, default pixel, that's what I'm calling it, is equals to, and I set it to those values. There's no way of going around this and setting it to different values. This part here will become the problem. This part over here. Because you need to initialize multiple values to 0. That's where the problem comes. So let me try some. Okay, I can't try it. Yeah, let's just leave it. To avoid your code having issues, I'm just gonna even remove the constructor, UJ pixel from that constructor, because now you see this pixel is very complex. And they told you, you see that, okay, you actually don't need the parameterized. You see why following instructions is very important. They say when the image is created, that means the function to read the file should be called within that constructor. That's what it means. That means you read the values from the file. That's what it means. So that means you do not necessarily need the parameterized constructor. It's not that important, but we're just going to have it there. But it's not mandatory. The important one is the no args1 or the parameter list. Why? Because he uses it here to test. So if it's not there, that means your code won't run. So hence I say the parameterized one is not really important. And I need to update my helper method to not take a pixel, the constructor helper method, to not take a pixel like this. And then I need to also update it down there to not take a pixel. Where is it? Yeah, to not take a pixel here. Yeah, then we are good to go. So I forgot to create maximum for max row, min row. I'm gonna call it size, min size, max size. So static const unsigned short min size, right? Minimum size. Is that the minimum? Should I say 0? Is that the minimum that you can have? Yeah, let's say minimum. Let's say 0. Then static const unsigned short max size. The maximum size you can have, let's say, remember I'm using unsigned short, so that means the maximum integer can represent 64,000. So whatever value I'm typing here where there's question marks, it needs to be, it needs to not be greater than 64,000. So let's say I say 20, okay, 10,000, let's just say 10,000 like this. And to make the number readable, you can put an apostrophe. It doesn't change the number, it just makes it easy to read for other developers. Then here I'm gonna say starting from min size up to max size. Remember, max size, if you start from counting from 0, you always stop at the number before. So it's going to be max size -1. And then I'm going to copy this, and then I'm going to enforce the columns, which is pretty much the same thing, but I just enforce the columns. And then I'm done enforcing. Then now I can start coding. But then remember, they said you should read from the file when the constructor is, when the object is created. Which is this is quite a different prac because or a different semester test because usually it calls it here. So he wanted you to think. So since I'm using a helper method, I'll read the file within the constructor helper method. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to initialize my rows. Underscore rows is equals to rows. Underscore calls is equals to calls. Didn't I call it underscore rows? Why is it not picking up? Yeah, I did. And remember, since this is the exact same type, you can avoid redeclaring it and just declare it in one line, separated by a comma, and say underscore calls. You can just do that. And then now I need to set my pixels. How come this thing, it's not picking it up? It's weird, but it's fine. So pixels is equals to new uj pixel, pointer, and then you start by allocating the outermost pointer. Remember, each pointer represents a specific dimension. So you need to specify how big is that dimension. So the first dimension, we're going to say it's as big as the number of rows. Then we go through that first dimension that we've allocated at every single row now and allocate a different dimension. Allocate that other dimension to be the size of columns. Because remember, you're gonna see it in maths. Okay, in maths 1B, when you do matrices. Or is it matrices? Yeah, I think it's matrices, whatever. But yeah, matrices sort of like represent the 2D array. If you look at matrices, at every single row, you have the exact same number of columns. That's pretty much what we call a 2D, right? It means that every single point of one of the dimensions, it points to another dimension of collections, right? So for example, my rows dimension at every single row, it points to another one-dimensional array of some size. For in this case, of size columns. That's pretty much what we call a 2D. So R++ and then what now? Then I go through all the single rows. So I go through that to that specific row and I allocate it to be a new pixel. Remember, I've allocated for the outermost pointer, so we can omit that. Every time you want to allocate for that dimension or for that pointer, you replace that pointer with square brackets, followed by the size that you want that pointer or that dimension to be. So I'm gonna replace this star, that watashi was star, with square brackets. And then I'm gonna put underscore calls because I want it to be of that size, of size columns. And then the default pixel, I don't know what the default pixel should be, but we'll see. Let's see how we can set it. So let me go through each column now. So when I go through each column, I'm now accessing every single value, right? I'm accessing every single value in my 2D array, meaning that it's like you're going to that specific point in the Cartesian plane, right? Remember Cartesian plane XY. In this case, our coordinate, right? Our point is at coordinate RC, row column. So now I'm going to say the specific row and column. And remember, when I go to that specific row and column, right? Pixels, row and column, what do I get? I get back a UJ pixel because this is a two-dimensional array of pixels or UJ pixels. So therefore, I need to say dot to get the specific thing that I'm looking for. Because it's a region. Remember, a UJ pixel has multiple values within it. You see, it has bool, visibility, current, blah, 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 all these things. So you need to set it to that. So I'm going to say dot visibility. This told you the visibility should be set to false. Is equals to false. So here you've answered that question whereby they said visibility should be set to false. Because remember, our aim is to make sure we get full marks for UJ image. Those other ones we can get partial marks here and there. Okay, full marks in certain things, but in certain things you don't get full marks. That's fine. The main aim is to get full marks here. So we've set the visibility to false. I don't know, like I said, okay, current intensity, you can set it to some weird value, it's fine. And intensities, you can initialize it to something, right? You can do that. So let's just, I don't know about intensities because it's a collection. So I'm gonna say pick underscore pixels RC dot current intensity. They just set it to 0. They didn't tell you what to set it to, so I'm just gonna set it to 0. And then copy this and then dot intensities. That's the thing about intensities. How are you going to initialize them? That's the tricky part about intensities. I don't know if remember this was complaining if you just use empty curly braces. Most of the time, if you use empty curly braces, it is supposed to initialize the whole array to 0, set to zeros, right? And then, okay, it works now. Okay, it finally works. It didn't complain. So yeah, this is how you can initialize all the values within. Maybe it's not complaining yet, but we'll see. Because I remember very well, you need to use empty curly braces if you want to set every single value within this collection to 0. But remember, this is a collection that grows in size. So if you have 10 intensities, it will become of size 10. If you have 12 intensities, it will become of size 12. Whatever the number is, it grows, it expands. Hence, it's a very good choice that you've made, since you do not know how many intensities are there, and they do tell you too that it's different. If you read the file handling part or the reading of the file part, they tell you that the first line has this, indicating the rows and columns, and the default. You see, they told you, and the default intensity. The rest of the file contains the data for each pixel, right? So we have the row, column, blah, blah, blah. Where's that part where it explains the current? Yeah, there is no guarantee that every pixel will have the same number of replacement intensities. So that means the number grows. So the only data type that grows as it receives more information, it's a vector and a list. You choose which one you want to make use of. They work exactly the same way. You need to choose which one you're working with. So the default pixel, remember I was struggling to find out what the default pixel should be. You see, there's the default pixel. So we need to read the default pixel from the file. And they tell you that the file contains the rows and the columns. So you see that, yeah, this is okay. This is now things need to change. because they're telling me that the rows and columns, they get them from the file. That's what's going on now. So they're read from the file, which is something that I don't like how they tend to do things. So these rows and columns, they're not to receive, or you don't receive them from the user. Hence, inside main.cpp, he didn't create an object and he passed the rows and columns, meaning it doesn't expect you to really have that. So since this is now causing unnecessary problems for me, because now it's going to cause me to overthink when I shouldn't overthink it, I'm gonna only have a parameterless constructor. That means my constructor, this one, should take in no parameters. Now you ask yourself, how will you set these rows and columns? You read from the file. Remember, that's what they told you they. So you need to read from the file. So that means I need the F stream. So I'm gonna go up here and read. So now it's forcing me to read the file right now. So F stream. So they told you that, yeah, they told you to create the function that reads from the file. So we're just going to go into that function and implement. Okay, I won't implement. Let's just assume, yeah, this is how it's going to work. Remember, let's assume the function is implemented, right? That means the rows and the columns, especially the rows and the columns, will be set, right? So I'm gonna come here and then I'm going to say load from txt, right? And then the file that I'm loading from is called pixels underscore large dot txt. Hence, it didn't. That now I understand why it didn't code inside main. He expects you to code it when during construction, because if you check here, instructions are very clear because they told you that during the creation of the object, when the image is created, the pixel data must be read from the provided text file. They did tell you. So hence, I mean, within this constructor helper method, that's when I load that from that file. So now I would have to go down and read from the file. And remember the current intensity, they told you that the default pixel you read it from this file, right? So I actually do get the default pixel. That means I shouldn't put my own there. So I'm gonna go inside UJ image and create a variable. This is rare. This is something different. You never really do this. This paper is different. Oh, I see now why it was different. It was the SSSA. Yeah, don't take chances and write special tests. You see how confusing this thing is if you don't know what you're doing. So underscore default pixel, right? This will be read from the file, right? So hence I need to also save it, store it there. So that means this shouldn't be 0. This should be default pixel that's read from the file. And then, yeah, that's pretty much everything. Yeah, that's everything that we need. We've allocated the memory, everything is fine. We've set the visibility to false as required. Then now I need to go to the copy constructor, obj. I'll call this obj right hand side because it'll be on the right hand side. Then I'm gonna go through all of my rows and columns so that I get that specific pixel. R is less than obj dot underscore rows R plus plus, and then for unsigned short C is equal to 0. C is less than obj right hand side dot underscore calls C plus plus. And then my pixels array, and that my pixel should be set to that pixel from the right hand side. So I'm copying the values. So underscore pixels are C. And as you can see, I'm not swapping. If I was swapping, then I would obviously need to save the value that was here. I'm actually changing it. Hence, it's called a copy constructor. So I'm changing it. So that's fine. That's what I needed to do there. And then remember how we allocated. We allocated for each row. So I need to go through each row and delete that whole column dimension. So R is less than rows R plus plus. And then delete. Remember how we allocated. We say for that specific row is equals to new blah blah, but it was a new size, right? A new dimension of that size. So to empty it out, you just leave it empty. And you need to use the delete keyword. But C++'s syntax, it forces you to put that square bracket immediately after the delete keyword. That's just C++, how you should do it. And then now, since I've deleted my columns dimension, now I need to delete my rows. Because remember, I still have this rows dimension. So you just say delete underscore pixels. And you shouldn't say anything here because there's no other dimension left. Hence, it's like that. And then you need to always set it to now pointer once you're done so that you cut the connection. You don't try to access memory that was deleted already. And then we've implemented our destructor. So let me call my destructor helper method here. So destructor. Remember what a function call does. It just copies and pastes the code that's inside of that function. There's nothing special about that function. It just comes here, copies this, and then it pastes it. It pastes it there. Done. So you see that I don't have to repeat myself. And then I'm gonna go where is it? Yeah, my constructors, right? So this is my constructor. I need to remember there's no parameterized one anymore because we are reading the rows and columns from the file. So I'm just gonna call the constructor method. It's parameterless because there's no rows from the user. It's from the file. And then this will be obj right hand side. And then I'm going to use the copy constructor helper method to copy that object obj right hand side. And then this one, I also call it obj right hand side. This one I've implemented many times. You should understand it by now. So if I'm not pointing to the same address as the other object, right? So we're avoiding reassignment, right? Basically, if the values are the same, there's no need to copy. They're exactly the same. There's no need. So we're avoiding to waste that time. So you always start by destroying that object, right? To make sure that so you destroy or destroy the object first. And then allocate memory to make sure the objects are the same size. Are the same size. And then I'm gonna say constructor. And remember that constructor helper method is parameterless. And then now I copy the values or transfer the values, whatever terminology you want to use. So copy constructor. I copy from which object? Obj right hand side, which is this obj right hand side. And then once I'm done, I return myself. So I return my object, me. So how do I do that? I use this keyword. And then that keyword I need to deref because this keyword is a pointer. So if you just use it like that, you're returning the address. But this function expects you to return a UJ image so that it can get its address, that UJ image. So therefore, I need to dereference or point to this object or to myself to get that actual object. Here I use this keyword because I was comparing addresses. As you can see, address of, if my address is the same as the address of that object, is not the same, then I can transfer. But if it's the same, just skip because that means it's the same value and then return myself. And then this will be, okay, this is the nice thing about having helper methods. It speeds up the development process. So now I'm gonna enforce the range because remember, we need to make sure that the pixel you're trying to access exists. So row, you start from 0 to underscore rows -1. Then enforce range. That column it needs to be within 0 to columns -1. Once that's enforced and that passes, then I can return a pixel because that means it exists if it passed all those tests. And that's pretty much how you implement that method, that operator. Done. And then here, I just return underscore rows. And then here I return underscore calls. And then, yeah. So now the tricky part comes, right? The thing is, they will not. The thing is, I don't know how they actually want you to instantiate or blah. But you see this delegation part. Now we're not sure how you should supposed to delegate because there's different types of transformers, right? How would you know which transformer to instantiate to? You could, maybe it's in the file that you're reading from. Let's try to see what information the file has. Where's that part? Okay, there's the part. Um, okay, current intensity is an integer. Mm, int to that. Okay. As integers, the effect might differ given length if it's 6. The rest of the array must be filled with zeros. Mm, okay, I don't see it. I don't see where it tells you which pixel, right? So which pixel, which transformer to instantiate. So since they didn't tell you, you could. The thing is, I don't want to work with guess games, whatever. So let's see. It's a private base class. The threshold intensity, which is represented as an integer and should be instantiated during creation. A non-value returning pure, blah blah blah. So this is the problem. So they tell you that the UJ class is a transformer, right? Which implements the transform non-value that will set the pixels attributes according to the instructions given above, right? The UJ image delegates its own method to the contained transformer. The UJ class must manage its own life cycle, blah, blah, blah. I'm not sure if it's going to work, right? Because it's not going to work. Because remember, we're managing the life cycle, so we need to allocate the memory of a transformer and deallocate memory of the transformer. But the question is, which transformer do we allocate and deallocate memory for? And we shouldn't put both. Yeah, most of the time we shouldn't put both, but in this, I don't know, seems like at this point in time, let me see, here the following, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, they just want you to figure it out. Hence it's called an SSSA. It's a special test. This one, it's for special people. They're trying to make sure that you feel it because you had a lot of time to prepare. But most of the time they'll tell you whether, let me check. Most of the time they tell you they need to be direct. They can't just leave you stranded like that. So let me check this one. Wait, this is also the SSA. Nope, it's the wrong paper. It's not the SSA. Because the SSA is all those special papers. They don't most of the time they don't tell you. So I don't know. It's up to you. If you wrote the SSA or they wrote the main and they didn't tell you, what you could do is you could where is it? This past paper. Let me look for a main. Is it 2023 or 2022? I think it's 2023. Okay, 2023. But some of those PDFs you can't open them. So let me check if, but rather a pixel painter is a kind of, and then this is how it's going to look. Yeah, you see what I told you? Yeah, image type. You see, this one was storing what type of image to use. So you should have used that image type in this paper. So since, like I said, SSA is special, it's for special kids who are not serious, who don't want to write the main test. Yeah, they make it hard. You see, this one is straightforward. The image type determines what kind of filters to be instantiated. So you can, and when you instantiate, you decide which one to instantiate. So in this case, how would you go about doing it? Let me see if the record structure didn't store. Yeah, they didn't store. Yeah, they didn't store anything. They didn't say how it's going to. Yeah, they didn't store anything, Sham. You're just going off a whim here. So what I would do is I will. Should I do it randomly? Let me do it randomly because you can't always call both. Because if you call both, you won't see the actual output. Because if it's one transformer, right, it should be one way. If it's the other one, should be the output should be different. So you need to be able to see both outputs. So let me see. And according to, or you can call both. It's up to you. But the thing is, you need to know which one to instantiate. Hence polymorphism, or else you won't get the marks for the polymorphism part. So I'll use random generation. So I'm gonna say hash include C time. Like, don't write the SSA, guys, please. Even if it means that you get your 50% on the dot on the normal semester, go get that. Don't write the SSA. Because you see now, it's doing things different. You see, have you ever called the function to read from the file within the constructor? Nope. You've never done that so far. But here it asked you to do that. So don't write the special test or the sick test or whatever. Just write the main because it'll be straightforward. You don't have to think a lot. Okay, before we do that, let me output, right? So let me give my parameters name. So O left hand side and then obj right hand side. And then O left hand side. Remember they said it's a P2 image or PGM. Remember, follow instructions, P2, P2, PGM string, right? So we need to, this is a special, you see, this is a special test. You see, there's a lot of checking involved, even when you're printing. So let's do that. If a pixel's visibility is false, the default intensity must be inserted into the stream instead. Oh, remember that default intensity that I stored, we need to use it here. This paper was on steroids. So output P2 and then standard to put an end of line character and then followed by how many columns, so underscore calls, followed by a space and how many rows underscore rows, and then put an end of line character and then followed by the maximum intensity, which is 255. It's up to you. You can use 255. This the P2 image, the intensity is up to you. You can even say the maximum is 2. That's up to you, but just use 255 to be safe. They expect you to use it 255. So for unsigned, short r is equals to 0, r is less than my object on the right hand side's rows. Because remember, this is a friend function. What I kept talking about, friends know your secrets. So even if, remember, underscore rows is private, right? But how come this function has access to it? Because it's a private function. You see, it's a friend function, I mean. So you see, these are private, but how it has access to them? Because friends know your secret, no, they know things that are private, basically things that are known only by you. So hence it will have access to private member variables. Is it my Wi-Fi or someone is trying to join? Okay, time flies once it's already 2 hours. So underscore calls and then C++. And then, yeah, remember we need to check. So this is an SSSA. It's a special test, this one. You need to check a lot of things here. So it's a P2 PGM string using only the current intensity of each pixel and inserts it into the stream. You see what I told you here? Only the current intensity of the stream. Be very careful. Only the current, don't insert other things. So what they mean is that when you come here, you need to say O left hand side, OBJ, right hand side. Then comes a special thing. Yeah, if you have deep understanding, you'll understand. Remember, we defined an operator here. This to access pixels. So I don't have to say dot. And I can just say, put round brackets, then say RC. So you need to make use of all the tools that you've already implemented. So I can just do that. It gets me the pixel, right? But then remember, it gets me the pixel, but I want the current pixel. This returns a UJ pixel. So I need to say dot, then I get current pixel, current intensity, I mean. Then I've outputted the current intensity. And then it needs to have a space. Yeah, you need to have a space. And then after going through the columns, then you output an end of line character, always. So that it's in grid form. Because our main goal is so that it displays in grid form. But then remember, you can't just display this. There's rules for displaying. Let's check what are the rules. If a pixel's visibility is false, the default must be inserted into the string. So you either output current or default based on the visibility. As people are not playing around. So obj right hand side, row column, right? Because you have that operator, dot visibility is equals to true. If the visibility is equals to true, that's when I output the current intensity. Else, remember else, it means that the previous condition was false, meaning that the visibility was false. Then I output the default intensity, which is stored inside obj right inside dot underscore default intensity. I don't know why it's not picking it up. Remember, we stored it here. Oh, it's default pixel. Yeah, default. So I named it wrong. It's not default pixel. Why did I name it default pixel? You see things, not naming things right. They said default intensity. They did say it. Where is it? Yeah, default intensity. Normalize naming things the right way. So this is default intensity. We still need to initialize that because we need to do file handling, right? So you needed to do that. And then yeah, default intensity, done. And then we need to remember this function explicitly return an O stream object, which is O left hand side. So once I'm done, I need to return O left hand side, then done. And then we're pretty much done with everything. Now we're left with this problem here. Remember what I said, we're gonna do random, right? We're gonna do the random generation thing. Let me see main. Yeah, you see there's random here. Which, oh, I see now. This paper was on steroids. Dr. Chung gave you ENT. He used the SRAM to tell you that you need to figure out and choose pick the, what's the thing, what's this, the transformer randomly. So I was on the right track this whole time. So let's choose it randomly. So I'm gonna create a random integer. So unsigned short int, or just short num. Let me call it, or is it num or x, whatever you want to call it. And then or random int. And so let me call it random int, right? For random integer. Then if I generate random integer, but remember it's in the standard namespace. I call the rand function, and then I mod it by the range, right? So what is the range? I want to generate a random value between 1 and 2. So I want to generate a value between 1 and 2. So the range is basically 2, which is the upper bound, minus the lower bound, which is 1, which gives me a 1. So modded by 1. But that range, you realize that there'll be a 1 missing. So I need to add back the 1 so that it starts at exactly 1 and it stops at exactly 2. So I need to add back the minimum or the lower, which is a 1. And then I found the random integer. Now I choose which transformer to uh, to instantiate. So I'm going to say if random int equals 1. It's up to you. You just choose randomly which one you will instantiate when it's a 1, which one will instantiate when it's a 2. It's up to you. You choose. So I would choose a volatile transformer if it's a 1. No, if it's a 1, I'll choose the other one. Which one? Volatile. Where's the other one? Yeah, a fixed transformer and a volatile. So fixed, it's a 1. volatiles 2. So I need to create the header files for this and the classes, which is quite a lot of files involved in this semester test. So I'm going to say new file, header file, fix transformer.h, put it into my project, remove the underscore included just because I don't want it. And then I put its equivalent implementation file. So .cpp, then all, then do this, and then include the fixed transformer header file .h, right? And then now I need to create the volatile transformer. There it is. Yeah, if they don't tell you, most of the time they do tell you. If they don't tell you, you see that Dr. Stung expects you to do it randomly. .h, and then, because if it wasn't random, why would you put a random generator? Why would you see the random generator function when there's nothing random in the practical? There's no way where they told you generate random values. It needs you to use common sense. Hence, it's called an SSSA, a special one. If you ask, I'm sure if you ask Dr. Stung, he does tell students that he advised no one to write the SIG test or the special tests, just write the normal ones. And then volatile, so I'm just going to create the empty class like this. You see that you can get a lot of marks just having a few things, but we'll get to that once I've allocated, once I've finished UJ image. So now I need to delegate, right? So let me go back to UJ image. So the files are now existing. If you remember, if you watch the video that I made, what is this? Underscore transformer that I made is that if you have, you can create one instance within UJ image. You don't have to create all of them. You can create only the base class. Remember, the base class would have to be abstract, meaning that you cannot instantiate it. That means you cannot come here and say new transformer. It's going to crash. It's impossible. You can't create an abstract class. You can't. So what you can do is you can come here and instantiate a new child class. This is possible because C++, what it does, right? It's going to check if this is the parent on the left-hand side. And it is. Look at the data type of transform. It's of base class. And then it looks at what's on the right-hand side. Is that a child class? Is it a child of this one? If the answer is yes, then it allows it. So therefore, you do not have to create a volatile transformer instance here, and then you create a fixed transformer. They didn't tell you that too. So follow instruction. That's not what they said. If you look at here, they told you it has a transformer. Remember that they're English, these people. They know English. They can't make a mistake of, or they forgot to say it's fixed transformer. They know what they're talking about. They say transformer. That means you need to have one instance. Don't put two things there. You lose marks because everything counts for marks here. So I'm gonna say, remember what I said? I say if it's new, then we're gonna, if it's a one, if the random number is one, then we're gonna create a fixed transform. So when you say new, it calls the parameterless constructor. So we need to create parameterless constructors within these two child classes. And that's pretty much it. And then here I'm going to come and say underscore transformer is equals to new volatile transformer, then done. Right? We've instantiated the objects, right? So now, no, I'm doing it the wrong place. You see, I'm doing it the wrong place. My bad, I'm doing it the wrong place. I need to do it within the constructor helper method, this one. Where when you're creating the image, this is life cycle. I'm mixing things now. I'm putting it in the wrong place. So life cycle management. That's when you manage life cycle and allocate memory. But then here we're just dedicating. This is pretty straightforward. You're going to say underscore transformer. And then remember, this is a pointer. So if you use it on its own, it's just referring to the address. You want to access the function within that object. So you need to get the actual object. So you need to dereference first. And then sometimes people gets confused when you dereference and use a dot. So you need to put round brackets on it so that it knows which thing are you actually dereferencing. Then you can start using dots, right? And say dot, then you access to get the thing that you're looking for. So this can be confusing sometimes because what happens when you forget the round brackets? That means your code crashes, right? So an alternative is to say minus and is to put the arrow pointing in that direction and then you call that function. So the function that I want to call, remember I'm delegating to another transform method. So therefore I need to access another transform. Remember what type this is. It's of type transformer. So it's going to go inside transformer class and look for this transform method. In this case, it's going to crash because transformer does not exist, right? So I need to create it. So public, and then, okay, we're going to create a parameter as constructor just so that it has the parameter as constructor. And remember what I said, this is a base class, so it needs to, the instruction needs to be made virtual so that it's inherited or overridden by the child classes. So remember, we need to have a void transform, right? But then remember the void transform, if you check, they said it should be, remember the transformer class, right, is an abstract base class. What makes an abstract base class? It's when it has a pure virtual function. The keyword is pure. By pure meaning it is that equals to zero part. If you miss that equals to zero part, marks gone. Might get half of the actual marks. So be very careful. So this is a virtual function. So virtual function and then make it pure 0. So now it's a pure virtual function. But remember, it needs to transform something. So it's wrong. I need to call it transform. It needs to transform something. Should it transform? You transform a UJ image. Therefore, it needs to take in a UJ image because it needs to do the transformation on the UJ image, right? How will I make the transformation if I don't have the image? So hence I take in the image. But remember what we talked about. Things, when you're passing things by a value like that, it's costly on memory and speed. So you need to pass it by address. And it needs to transform it. Remember, listen to the name, transform. So it's going to change it. Hence, I shouldn't put a const there because I'm expecting it to change UG image. So this is fine. And then now when I try to call it, right? So when I do this, it should, okay, I didn't include the header file. So let me include the header file. Include transformer. What's going on here? Why is this thing, something seems off. Oh, I think it's this thing of the different folders. Yeah. Remember how I created the UJ image class? It's not in the same folder, it's fixed and yeah. Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that approach that I showed you in the beginning. Just don't do that because you see now you face issues in terms of including. It is gonna work, but see now you face issues. It might even crash, never know. So just avoid what I did, what I showed you. It's very convenient, right? But what if you face errors that you can't fix? So just don't do it that way. Create your classes from scratch. So transformer, and then I'm going to do this, and then you see, it doesn't even auto-complete anymore. That's the danger of creating it in that way that I showed you to create it. So it expects you to pass in a UJ image. So remember this keyword, it helps me to refer to this current UJ image or this current instance. But this keyword is a pointer, so this will just return the address. This transform function expects me to return an actual UJ image, so I need to dereference. And there's only one parameter here, so it's fine. If you have multiple parameters, sometimes it happens. That means you have to dereference, then pass maybe num of time, something like this. Yeah, it does happen. It's rare, but Dr. Stung might change things up to make sure that all those ones who are cramming, they stay behind. Lecturers have that tendency. So this is how you would delegate and normalize putting comments because comments is worth 2%. So delegation, this is what comments means. Explain those specific parts that may be confusing, like this delegation. And then also life cycle management so that your assistant knows where to mark. They'll see, oh, okay, I should mark here. Then they mark there, right? Obviously, it doesn't know what fixed transformer is, so I need to include the header files in here, right? So I need to include the, oh yeah, you see what I was talking about is different folders. So this is how you actually should actually include it. Yeah, don't do that technique. You see now, that's why it wasn't auto-completing. So don't do that. Avoid that other approach because now your code is gonna look like this. Mm, what's next? Yeah, I think that everything should be fine now. So let me start reading from the file. So now we're just doing file handling. And then once we're done with file handling, then we can calculate the marks. So file handling is not too bad, but there's quite a lot of things involved that you need to understand. So remember, I need to read from the file. So I'm gonna say standard, then I'm gonna use an if stream. There's many ways you can do it. You can use an if stream, or you can just use an f stream itself, and then specify in what mode you're reading in. It's up to you. So me, I'm just going to use if stream to make things a bit simpler in this one. But in the SSA, I did show you an alternative. And then I need to open the file. So if you know that you can forget to open the file, you can call the constructor the moment you're creating it and just pass in the file name like this. This will open the file with that specific file name. So you can do that. And then you don't need to specify in what mode because you're using an if stream. So it knows that it's in read mode or in input mode you're reading. And then remember the first thing that we need to get from the file. So this is important. You need to understand. So we need to get what are we getting from the file? They said the first line contains the rows, columns, and default intensity. You don't even need to check your file that they gave you. Look at the PDF, it should explain what's going on. But if you wanted to, you could open Pixels Large and then open it in Notepad++ and then check for yourself. You could confirm, that's up to you. Some weird reason my Notepad is just taking. Must delete it and then reinstall it. So let me open with VS Code. Yeah, and they didn't lie because you see we have rows, columns, and the default pixel. Is that the default pixel or whatever? So we need to get that line first, right? Let me check. Yeah, default intensity. That I need to store that default intensity. Remember, we created a variable for that. Keep that in mind. We created the variable for default intensity. So I need to get the line. So to get the line is pretty okay. I'm gonna need a string stream because I need to use the string stream to convert it to the right type. Since I'm reading strings, remember it's a text file, so I'm reading strings. But then I eventually need to store them as the right type. So I'm gonna import the string stream, go back here, and then standard namespace string stream. I just recently found out that if you wanted to only focus on input string stream, you can say I string stream like that. Didn't know, but yeah, you can do that. But I'm just gonna use the string stream the way you guys have been using it. SSIN, I'm gonna call it SSIN or SS because it's neither input or output, it does both. So standard namespace get line function, which gets a line from a specific input stream. Remember, this is an if stream, input file stream. What is it called? fin. So fin, it gets a line. So obviously, it needs to store the line somewhere, which is in a string. So therefore, I need to create a string called line. So string line, and then that string will be stored inside this line. That's read from the file, will be stored inside this string line. So since we've read from, I don't know, my brain seems to kind of get lost when it comes here. Okay, I remember now. So yeah, now I need to insert into the string stream, right? Insert the line into the string stream. How do we insert? Remember to insert, we usually say C out, then we see output, right? But now it's the string stream called SS. So SS, we're inserting into the string stream the line. And remember, this line is 3 values. And the same way you read from the file is the same way you're going to extract from the file. So if I check my Visual Studio, my text file, I inserted the rows first, and then inserted the columns, and then inserted the default pixel. I need to get them in that exact same order. That's how it goes. It's like in a queue. You can't go in a queue to Capitec to withdraw, right? And then in that queue, you just go straight, you skip everyone and you go to the ATM. What's gonna happen? Some people might throw hands. You're definitely you're gonna catch those hands. So the same way applies to that queue. It works the same. The string stream works the same way. In that same order that you inserted, the same order that you extract. So now let me extract rows, columns, and then default intensity, right? So I'm gonna write comments so that when you look at the code, it's easier to follow through in that exact same order: rows, columns, default. So remember, we have variables for rows, underscore rows. I have a variable for that. And then I have a variable for columns, underscore calls, right? And then I have a variable for default pixel, underscore default intensity, right? And then once you're done reading everything, the problem with C++, I don't know why they did that. It's just annoying. These things are stored in what called a buffer or a waiting area. So imagine, which is a weird thing. Imagine in the queue, right? When the person goes to withdraw, they go back in the queue where they were. And then the second person goes to withdraw, then they go back to exactly where they were in the same position in the queue. Then the third person goes withdraw, and then they go back in the third place in the queue. So that means when if you had the person calling people in the queue, and then you call those first three people, and then you go back inside the branch, right? And then you come out and you call them again. Which people are you gonna find? The ones in the front, because they're still in the front, they're not being removed from the queue. That's literally what the string stream does. So you need to clear that whole string stream before reading any other information. So string stream or ss dot clear. So it clears the buffer. So clear the buffer, the waiting area, so that when I read again, it doesn't start rereading the same rows. I don't want that. So I want it to clear, meaning that it's just going to delete this whole thing. So basically, the string stream goes back to the same state it was in, basically empty. Then now we can get all those multiple lines. Since there's multiple lines, right, I can do a while loop and say while. How do you find out when the file is at the end? There's this thing called EOF, right? You can say while fin dot is it EOF? Yeah, EOF function, meaning end of file, right? It returns the state whether you're at the end of the file or not. But then I want to say that while I'm not at the end of the file, so I'm gonna negate and say not while not fin.eof, meaning while I'm not at the end of the file, what should happen? Keep rereading the line. This is one way to do it, right? This is the one way. Or the other way, we just say read the line here, right? We put it in the condition here, like this. So while there's a line to read, get it. So that's the other approach. That means this one, you won't need it if you chose the second approach. I'm just going to choose the second approach, which just says while there's a line to read it from my file input stream, and store it inside the string. And then remember, don't forget to clear every time you get that line once you're done. So what I'm going to do is I need to find out in what order. So we need to get the row, column, current intensity. And then this number, it differs, which is true because you can check here. So you can see for yourself, you have two, this is a row and column. And then you see here, there might be this number, say those number of values. here might be this number of values, and then sometimes they might be different. There might be 2, there might be 3. So the numbers is different. It is a lot of numbers, you see? Look at this right panel. This is a long file. Hence, file handling is very important. You see how important file handling is? Imagine getting these values from the user. I guess that's why we do file handling, so that we avoid getting values from the user. You see how plenty the values are? It would take a long time to get the values from the user. So hence we do it this way. So what I'm going to do is I've read the line and I need to check my file. They said in what order? Row, call, current intensity. Let's start with those 3 first. Those are the easy ones to get right. So I need to also create variables here. So unsigned, short, row, call, and they all need to be initialized to 0. Right? You must normalize initializing your variables. Row, call, intent. Is that default or current? Current intensity. Oh yeah, it's current intensity. So no, it's fine. Current intensity, remember, is stored for every single pixel. So I can store it directly into the, yeah, let me store it directly. As people's not playing around. Definitely not playing around. If you didn't know what you're doing, you're gonna fail dismally here. So we need to insert into the stream, right? So insert line into the string stream. Right, let's insert it. So insert in the line, and then now we extract the integers, right? We're going to extract the row call current intensity in that same order, right? Because it was inserted into the string stream in that order. So we need to extract it in that same order that we did insert it in. Then I'm going to say SS store it inside row, and then for that specific column, and then redirect into what the question now is what pixel or what variable are we using. Remember, we can just say here underscore pixels. That specific row, this one that I just finished getting, and a specific column that I finished extracting, call, and then I get the current intensity dot current intensity. So I'm going to store it inside the current intensity for that specific row and column. So that's why I said it wasn't necessary for it to create a variable for current intensity. And then there's a current intensity. Now we need to store these intensities, right? So how do we do that? There's a function called pushback, which push you back. Think of it in terms of a queue. When you enter a queue, do you get pushed to the front or you push to the back? You get pushed to the back, right? So that it's it's a first come first serve thing. So that's how this list we're going to use it. So I'm going to push to the back. So I'm going to use the pushback function. So what am I pushing back? Remember, I need to get the intensities, these intensities. So I'm going to create a temporary variable, right? I'm going to create a temporary variable at the top there. I'm going to call it intensity. Intensity. Because I'm going to read one intensity at a time, right? So, oh, let me see. Oh, yeah. So remember the line, right, is stored inside the string stream. Yeah, so remember this whole line here, this is stored in the string stream. But I know that this first 3 values is the row and then the column and the current pix and the current intensity. Then these other values, I don't know exactly how many they are. So how do I achieve that? How do you do that? What's the actual way of doing that? Remember, you can also say ss.eof. You can also use that while it's not at the end. You can also, I think you can do that. I'm not sure. Really not sure, but yeah, I think you can use EOF. But me, I'll use this approach. I'll just say while SS, right? And then I'll say intensity, that local variable that I created. So while inside the string stream, there's a integer to read and store it inside this, continue reading it. Because I don't know how many values are there. Hence, I use a while loop, which just says, while this is true, while this is possible, then keep extracting. So how, if I'm extracting these values, how is that going to work? This is how it's going to work. It's going to check, is there still a value to read? Yes, there's 116. And then it reads 116. And then it checks, that's the question, is there still another value to read? And it answers yes, which is 37. It keeps asking until it reaches the end. It asks, there's still a value to read, and then it says no, then the while loop stops. So that's what's going on right now. So all these values, I need to add them to my list. How do you add them? And they're going to be stored inside the variable intensity, right? How do I add them? It's simple. You're going to say underscore pixels, that specific row and column. Which row and column? This one here. So we need to be very careful that row and column. Dot intensities, right? Intensities. And then now I've gotten the intensity, which is that list. And then within the list, remember the list is an object. It's an object, right? So it has methods. So dot within intensities, there's a function called push back, right? Which pushes the value to the back of the queue. So I'm gonna add the intensity value. Remember the intensity will store that each value at a time. It'll store 116, then store 37, then store 219, then store 42, then store that. It's gonna keep storing one value at a time. So hence I use the pushback method. Because you see why they wanted you to use a list or a vector, because you don't know how many values are there. So hence you needed to use a function called pushback. There's marks for that. And then remember to always clear the string stream buffer or the string buffer. It's called a string buffer. So dot clear, so that the next time it reads, it's gonna find the string buffer empty. And then that's pretty much all we needed to do to read from the file. And then now we're left with the last thing here. I don't know if I should implement everything because I'm looking at time. I think I'll just stop. Yeah, I'm looking at now, time is flying, but it's up to you guys if you can continue. So I'm just gonna finish save to implementing this file to save to a binary file. Then I will calculate the marks so that you see how far this code, how much this code is worth so far.
Okay.
Do you have a question?
No. I think can you do this last part, the save to that thing, as like can you post a short video on YouTube?
Can I what?
Post a short video on YouTube.
Of the save to that.
Yeah.
Uh, it doesn't really make a difference. So I can just do it now because something it's quick. It's not like this one over here. It's literally one line to write to the file.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, so let me just do it quickly. So you can also pass the name like this, and then you put in the mode, right? What type of mode are you reading the file? Are you writing, or is it in binary? Are you writing to a binary file or reading a binary file? That's what the mode does. So it's going to say standard and then iOS input output stream, and then you get a constant. The constant that I want is the binary constant, which says that open this file in binary mode, meaning that it expects this information that you're writing to the file to be saved as binary. So answer in short, r is equals to 0, r is less than what underscore rows r plus plus, and then for unsigned short, c is equals to 0, c is less than underscore calls c plus plus, and then now we write to the file. It's simple to write to the file. I keep forgetting. I almost forgot. Remember, you open the file. Don't forget to close it. There's marks for closing it. So fin dot close. The same way you'd open a file on Windows, you'd close it when you're done, right? So that's why we also need to close it here. Because that's literally what we're doing. We're opening a file, but using code to open the file, which is very powerful. and changing the file just using code, not actually using Microsoft Word or Notepad, literally coding in C++ to change the file, which is very powerful. So F out, there's the write method. So to write, let me just double check how you should write, because this paper is spiritual. It's very spiritual. There's a lot of things involved here. A seed value which is set via blah, blah, blah. So we're not going to implement that. I'm not going to do that, because the main thing that we're looking for is marks here. So let me see. See now, I lost my train of thought. What am I looking for? Okay, file handling. Mm, which will save all the pixels to, yeah, it just saves. Okay, there's nothing fancy. So you're gonna use reinterpret cast because you want to, when you save to a file, you have to save it as a char pointer, right? But then your actual pixels are what type of a pointer are they? You see, they're BJ pixel pointer. So what you're trying to do right now, you're trying to cast or convert from one pointer to another. The function that you can use to do that is called a reinterpret cast. When you're trying to cast from one pointer to another pointer. So you need to pass since it's templated, right? You need to pass the type there. So I want to cast to a const char pointer, and then it takes in the address. Because remember, it's just a pointer. Remember how you initialize pointers? You pass in an address of that value. That's how you initialize a pointer. So I need the address of that pixels, right? Underscore pixels are C, and then comma the size of that information you're writing. Remember, we packed it as 1 byte. So there's two ways you can get the size. You can just say uj pixel like that, or you can just get one value within your array. That's totally up to you. But I'm just gonna do it this way. And then done. You've written to the file. The writing to the file, to the binary file will never change. To be honest, it will never change. The code will always be the same. The only thing that can be different is like how you've named your pixels array and what they asked you to name the record structure. That's the only thing that can change. The rest all is the same. Yeah, so basically done with everything. Let me try to build and see if if I'll get any errors. Okay, yeah, UJ image, you need to do a forward declaration because you're not implementing. Remember in the header file, you only put forward declaration because you're not implementing. And then I made a mistake again because I'm accessing it this way instead of saying dot, because this is a friend function. It's not part of the class. So you have to access everything via that object that's being passed. Okay, seems like it doesn't like this. Well, I think this thing of creating things in different files. The way I created UJ image, I think that was the problem. Let me see. So no match to const UJ. Okay, it's fine. I'll do this. Yeah, I think this thing of underscore. Yeah, you see, it's not picking up. It's not picking it up. So like this thing of the way I created the UJ image file, I think that's the main problem. Yeah, I think that's the main problem, but it's fine. Let me call the array itself. Let me not overload. Let me not use that operator. It's fine. Mm, underscore default in intensity. Intensity. I renamed it. Mm, what is it talking about? Remember, cannot convert. Oh yeah. You'll only get this error if you didn't do the inheritance, right? So yeah, this it becomes really annoying, but then let me just quickly inherit, right? Show the inheritance. So I'm gonna come here. So I need the transformer. Header file, so transformer, header file, right? And then I need to inherit. So this needs to be public inheritance, like this. And then I go to the other one, I do the same thing. That's how I fix that error. Hmm. right? And then I'm going to say public transformer. With inheritance, it's fine. You can include the whole header file. But with composition, you always do for a declaration. Or of abstract type, you see, that's why I didn't want to implement this thing, but it's fine. So I haven't overridden this thing yet. So that's why it's complaining. So basically it's saying it's what's volatile. Yeah, so basically it still thinks fixed the child classes have abstract they have the pure virtual function, not really. And then to override, you can put that override keyword at the end and then remove virtual keyword here. There's many ways to do that. I did explain. You can just watch the video because of time. In the SSA video, I did explain those things. Yeah, I think they should fix the error. Undefined reference to. Yeah, I think really has a tendency of being annoying. So it doesn't see an implementation of the no args construct inside your base class because remember it's going to inherit a lot of these things. Mm, yeah, it's the thing of I haven't finished a lot. I haven't done a lot of things here. So let me put the constructors and destructors and oh yeah, I needed to put the. Remember what I talked about? The child classes need the constructors so that UJ image, since it's instantiating those things, remember it's instantiating them in such a way that it calls the parameterless constructors. So you need to put them inside of your classes. So I'll just do this. I won't implement, right? I'll just copy and paste so that the errors go away, or else the errors won't go away. That's C++. It has that tendency. Even if you don't write anything, the fact that it doesn't see something like this inside the CPP files for the child classes, it will say, yeah, you didn't implement, blah, 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 you must implement. And then the override keyword, you omit it in the implementation. And then there we go. You see empty, right? I will calculate the marks now. You realize that you can actually excel in this test, especially if you just make sure you do UJ image class well, really well. Then the other ones, you don't even need to implement the logic for this other one, for the child classes. Okay, there's some marks. Yeah, okay, there's some marks because there's where they say the constructor should take in this. The constructors for child classes, they told you what they should take, so you lose marks on that, but you might actually get good marks either way. Okay. Fixed transformer. Um, yeah, it's fine. Undefined reference to mm, oh, it's in the transformer. You see, this thing, you pretty much have to do almost everything. So it wants me to have somewhat of an implementation of. Remember, I said this is a virtual destructor inside of your base class, so it's going to be inherited by the child classes. So it says you didn't implement it, so it wants to see this, even though it's empty. Yeah, now all the errors are gone. So let's calculate how many marks you have. Each image is complete, right? Everything, even the alignment padding, UJ image class is complete. So let's look at the mark sheet. So assuming that you did your design properly, you know the symbols to use in UML, you get your 10 marks. And then class basics, you did constructors, whatever, 20. So you're sitting at 30% at the moment. And we haven't even looked at UJ image, things that are inside UJ image yet. And then you created the contained classes, right? As a relationship composition. You see that one line where you created the pointer there? That's worth 5%. Lifecycle management, we did that. Delegation, we did that. So this is composition and delegation. Oh yeah, you do get full marks here. Do you know what algorithm are they talking about here? Yeah, you do get full marks because here this is a topic. This is based on no, wait, is it overriding member? Oh, okay, no, it's fine. I don't know why they put the algorithm part here because this is talking about composition. Yeah, so the algorithm, you implementing that transform function is only worth 5%. So don't strain yourself. So far you have 30% plus this 15% here, which is 45% so far. Then we did all the operators. So that's 45 plus 15, that's 60%. You're sitting at 60% right now. And then you did the file handling 60 plus 15, that's 75%. You have a distinction at the moment. With all the code that we've written so far, you have distinction. And then abstract base class, that now you're sitting at 80%. Overriding that override keyword and redefining that function, now you're at 85%. Then the polymorphism, I'm not sure which part, polymorphism. Okay. And then remember visibility, right? You need to have protected. So inside of your base class, is it transformer? Yeah. Transformer, you need to have something here protected. This is the part where you get 5 marks for member visibility. This protected, you just having that protected is worth 5%. So get those full marks. And then if you decide to attempt to any of these, you get those partial marks. You see, you can get 100 without any output. So it's possible to get 100 without any output. So comments is worth 2%. So you're around distinction. So with what you've written so far. Yeah, distinction, even 90% around there. The thing is, you might lose those small marks. You see where you lose the small marks? If you end up putting it, then you get the full marks. So if you put those small things, you might end up getting exactly 95%. You see, they say a threshold, which is something that should be passed as an integer and is set during creation to a constructor. So you need to create a constructor that takes in a threshold. So basically, that's something that you need to have. Oh no, it's in the transformer, yeah. So remember what I talked about, the member visibility thing. Since you didn't declare it, you might get 2 marks. Okay, yeah, 2 marks, 2%, I think. This member visibility. Since there's nothing under protected, so you need to declare that something under protected. So, which is something very small. You're just declaring it there. That's what they want to see. So a threshold set during. So here so they actually want you to have here unsigned short underscore threshold, and then you get your full 5%. And then fixed transformer, is there anything that it takes in? Oh yeah, nothing. The other classes don't take in anything. Or a seed value that is set during by a constructor. So volatile needs to have that seed whatever. So but basically you're sitting around a distinction. And there's no image, there's no code, there's nothing inside the child classes. Because remember, when it comes to where's that marks for inheritance? Where is it? Yeah. You see inheritance, you do have an abstract base class. How will they know that your class is abstract? Pure virtual, they see that equals to 0. And then how will they know that this is an inheritance? There's inheritance, you did put it. And then you did redefine you did override the function. So you can get distinction with only what I've written so far. So the main point is UJ image. Make sure you implement everything inside UJ image. All the helper methods, all the constructors, well, all those things. You make sure you implement them. I hope it's kind of clear now how they're gonna go about allocating the marks. Do you guys have any questions?
Yeah. No, this was actually so very helpful. We understand a lot more now.
Okay. And anybody else with questions?
No, it's just the two of us. Her laptop died, but she's still here with me.
Oh, okay. And then if you don't have any question, then it's cool. I'll upload the video and make it private on YouTube. Then I'm gonna send you guys the link.
Okay.
Yeah, because
Thank you
I
so
know
much.
because I know very you guys would be like, no, don't make it public. I don't want it to be known. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it's fine. I'll make the video private.
Yeah, I was going to ask that.
Yeah, okay. All right, then all the best of the preparations. You can just go back to the recording and continue practicing.
Okay. Bye.
Sharp.